No, no problem, my friend. All is fine. Wait a second.
Yeah, it's we can see your presentation. You can make it full. Yeah, I think it's fine.
And can you see also me?
I can see your presentation.
Okay, okay, Dr. But can you also see me?
Yes, 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 I can see you.
Okay, great. Then perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, a pleasure.
Veer Kumar sir, good afternoon. Am I audible? Dr. Markus just joined and again he left the meeting. Can you just check with him? Yes, Sam. Yeah, go ahead, Sam. I think he's not in the meeting, no? Yeah, Dr. Marcus, could you please share once again your presentation because in between we couldn't see here.
Okay, okay, Dr. Ram, I will do so.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So you can see and hear me.
Yes, 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 yes.
Very good, my friend. You just
Okay.
give me a sign when I should start, okay?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Sam, I hope you could see his presentation. And what about the other participants? Can you see his presentation? Can you just confirm so that we can start?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sam, you can please start.
I can start?
No. Just wait, Professor Dr. Markus. We'll let you know it. So he will introduce you
perfect.
first. Yeah, he will invite all participants, including you, and he will also introduce. Then we'll start it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
His presentation is visible to me, Sam.
Can you see also me?
I can see your presentation.
Okay, Dr. Rabat, can you also see me?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay, great. That's perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
So, Dr. Markus, you can start now. I invite you to please start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So, hello everyone. Good afternoon to India. Good morning to Germany. I am presenting from Friedersdorf. That is our GRIM facility. It's close to Berlin or Leipzig, so we have 9:30. I'm very happy that you are on board for my webinar, for the 12th webinar. And before I will start, I want to thank Dr. Ram for the very friendly invitation. We had a very good exchange of knowledge and information. So thank you so much, Dr. Ram. And my name is Markus Pesch. And as you may heard or informed from Dr. Ram, I am Technical Director of GRIM Aerosol for more than 15 years meanwhile. I studied environmental engineering at the Berlin University. And honestly, I made my first aerosol measurements in the mid-80s. So it's roughly 35 to 40 years ago. The company GRIM was also founded 40 years ago. And we can really say that we are pioneers for measuring aerosols. And the intention of this talk is that I want to enhance your knowledge about aerosols, about aerosol measurement technologies. What does it really mean, cutting edge? And I can really tell you that measuring aerosols is even today a big challenge. Yeah? Aerosols are totally different to gaseous molecules. You may know SO2, ozone, ammonia. aerosols are so complicated to measure even today. And that is really the intention of this presentation, that you get a feeling how difficult are the measurings of aerosols and how or which instrument you have to use to measure them precisely. The presentation will roughly 40 minutes. So we have after that presentation enough time for some questions and comments. And you see here the overview. Of course, motivation is the big key to accelerate all measurement activities worldwide. I will present you some latest aerosol measurement technologies. I will also talk about the cutting-edge aerosol spectrometer that the Grimm company has just developed, and it is meanwhile Core 1 approved by the German TÜV. Then measuring aerosols means also measuring ultrafine particles. These are the very small particles, less than 100 nanometers. And as smaller the particles, as more difficult they are to measure. And at the end of the presentation, I will give you some measurement examples for PM10, PM2.5, and also for ultrafine particles. Is that fine? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes. Please go ahead.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. What is the main motivation for ambient aerosol measurements? You see here a picture that I did from arrival flight to Beijing. And you see here on that picture, the sky is not very clear. You have a lot of aerosols and dust in the atmosphere. The concentration was 800 microgram a cubic meter. That's a huge concentration. Even for Beijing, even for Delhi or Mumbai, these are very high concentration. I come to that point a little later. And the question is, of course, what is the reason for that air pollution and high pollution level of PM10? In that case, it was yellow sand. And a cutting-edge instrument should be capable not only to observe the pollution level, it should also be capable to give you information about the source, about the reason of the pollution level. On the next slide, you see Kathmandu, Nepal. That was also a flight close to the airport, and you see the sky is very similar to the sky of Beijing, but here the reason for aerosols was traffic and construction. And the interesting point when we are talking about airborne particles, aerosols, the size and the number of the aerosols gives really important information about the sources of the aerosols. If we have combustion aerosols, for example, from a diesel engine, you have very, very small primary particles. They agglomerate to some clusters, and you see the diameter is less than 100 nanometer. Nanometers 10⁻⁹ meters, so very small. The size of your hair, for example, is 80 micrometers. So nanometers are a very small matrix. You see the combustion aerosols are very small. Then you have construction. Here on the right picture, you see construction. Construction aerosols are mechanical produced aerosols. These aerosols are most often much larger. You see here a typical diameter, a typical picture of a dispersion aerosol, and here you see the diameter is a couple of 10 degrees higher than the combustion aerosols. So the aerosol size and the aerosol number give you important information about the source, about the reason of the high pollution level. When you compare, for example, the 800 microgram cubic meter in Beijing, and I know that in India there are many cities they have similar concentrations, you see what is really the recommendation of the World Health Organization. The recommendation of the World Health Organization for an annual value for PM10 is 15. For a daily value 45. Why are these values so small? Because there's not a limit or a value where you can say particles are not harmful anymore. So we have to reduce the particles to a minimum. We have to reduce the particles to a minimum, the aerosols in the atmosphere. And I know that even the global background of aerosols is today higher than, for example, 5 microgram for PM2.5. But of course, the World Health Organization published all the time values that should be the goal, the objective for all clean air strategies. So motivation for aerosol measurements, we need precise aerosol measurements in the environment. We have to look, of course, for limit value exceedances, but we want also to identify the high levels. Let us assume you have a clean air strategy for Delhi. In that clean air strategy, you have, of course, first to announce the most contributors to the pollution. Is it the traffic? Is it construction? Is it maybe also yellow sand? Or is it a natural aerosol? So to find efficient and effective measures, we have to determine the aerosols very, very precisely. And one very interesting point when we are talking about aerosols is also the difference between aerosol size and aerosol number. You see here a 3D picture, time, diameter of the aerosols, and the number concentration. And you see quite clear here that the number concentration of aerosols is determined by the very small particles. When we use the same data and calculate from the number of aerosols the mass, you see that the mass is determined by larger particles. And what you see also quite nicely, we have two modes. We call it accumulation mode and cause mode. And that is also an interesting behavior of our atmosphere. We have different modes where the aerosols most often occur. These large aerosols are determining the mass. The small aerosols are determining the number. Small aerosols means most often combustion aerosols, as I mentioned, soot. Large particles here, yellow sand. Yellow sand we would measure in that size range between 2 and 5 micrometer. In that size range, we call it the accumulation mode. Many small particles agglomerate, coagulate, and then we have larger diameters that are determining the mass. So question is, okay, we want to reduce the pollution level. All limit values today are mass-based, microgram per cubic meter. But meanwhile, we have more and more activities to measure also the number of aerosols, the size of aerosols. And the World Health Organization recommended first time in 2021 also to measure, to count the ultrafine particles. Therefore, I want also to present in my talk today cutting-edge instruments to measure really small ultrafine particles. Aerosol measurement technologies. Before I start to show you or to give you an overview about aerosol measurement technologies, I want to clarify some aerosol definitions. So aerosols means solid and liquid particles, not water. We do not want to measure water. That's very important because I can tell you water is one of the key factors that make aerosol measurements outside so difficult. You can assume if you have a foggy day, and what is really fog? What are the water droplets? And what is the solid or liquid particle, the aerosol? So foggy days are the most difficult days to determine aerosol concentration. So water is always an issue. We do not want to measure water, and therefore we have very, very tricky drying systems to dry the aerosols before we are measuring them. And to that point, I come later. And instead of aerosol, most often the term particle is used. So we use both, even at GRIM. Our name is GRIM Aerosol Technology. We are a member of the Dura group, but many people say instead of aerosols, also particles. Particulate matter is the English word for aerosols in the atmosphere, and that includes all particles. And I can tell you, when I studied environmental engineering in the mid-80s in Berlin, we were only talking about TSP. TSP means all particles, all suspended particles, droplets, liquids, in the size range from 1 nanometer, so the very, very small cluster particles formatted most often from SO2 oxidated with hydroradicals. I come to that later. So the very small particles are in the range of a nanometer. The very big particles, the big players, are in the range of 100 micrometer. But these large particles have a very strong sedimentation, the velocity to the ground. So for that big particle, we have only a few. But what you see, aerosols means 5 decades. 5 decades of sizes we have in the atmosphere. Meanwhile, we know that the size is very important for the harmful effect of an aerosol. As smaller the aerosol, as deeper the aerosol can enter into the lungs. The first value we have limited in Europe, for example, in 2005 was PM10. PM10 means all aerosols smaller than 10 micrometer. Yellow sand, for example, between 2 and 5 micrometer size, so that includes of PM10. A larger particle than 10 micrometer is not included. So that was the first limit where the size of aerosol is taken into account. Then PM2.5. PM2.5, similar particulate matter, smaller than 2.5 micrometer. So the number is always here, the size in micrometer. PM2.5 includes aerosols that are smaller than 2.5 micrometer. If you have a big difference in PM10 and PM2.5, you know, okay, I have a huge number of large particles, larger than 2.5, but smaller than 10. And nowadays we are talking about ultrafine particles, UFP. That is a third very important metric. Ultrafine particles means all aerosols smaller than 0.1 micrometer or 100 nanometer. So we are talking here about very small particles. Coming back to the example with the diesel engine, when you are on a traffic side and a diesel car accelerated, then you have a huge amount of very small combustion aerosols. These primary aerosols are in the range of only 10 to 30 nanometers. They agglomerate, they coagulate, but the primary aerosols are very small. So on streets where we have huge amount of traffic, we have the highest UFP concentration. And in that talk, I want to show you cutting-edge instruments to measure PM10 and PM2.5, but also instruments that are capable to measure here the very small, the ultrafine particles. And the very challenging point when we are talking about aerosols, we have different sources. We have biological sources as pollen, we have sand flow, yellow sand, big issue from China, for example, and that sand is transported over long distances. We have volcanic eruptions where we have huge amount of ash, but also of combustion aerosols to very high altitudes. We have agriculture. Agriculture is very interesting because you have directly emitted aerosols. We call that aerosols primary aerosols. But as you may know, agriculture is a big source for ammonia, for gases, precursor of aerosols. And this ammonia, NH3, will be converted in the atmosphere to aerosols. Then we have traffic and we have construction. Construction, you learned larger particles because it's a mechanical process. Traffic, combustion, condensation aerosols, very small. So we have different sources, and when I go further, we have also different sizes and colors. Yeah, here you see sea salt. Sea salt is not harmful at all. In contrast, people are going to the sea to breathe the salt, to breathe the fresh air. We have pollen, very critical for asthmatic people. We have ammonium sulfate, and this picture I really like. These are ammonium sulfate aerosols formatted from gases, precursors, nitric oxides, ammonia. You see here water around the ammonium sulfates, that is from the rain. You see a very nice spheric particles, but aerosols are most often not so nice spheric balls. We have also different shapes and different colors. And that makes aerosol measurements so challenging. An SO2 molecule, an ozone molecule, ammonia molecule is always the same. But aerosols are totally different in color, in size, in shape. And that is the challenging for our measurement technology we want to measure pollen, we want to measure ammonium sulfate, we want to measure mineral dust, we want to measure different aerosols, and the instruments should inform us about the mass, PM10, PM2.5, but also about the number, ultrafine particles, for example. What does it mean cutting edge? So I named the presentation Cutting Edge Aerosol Technologies. Grimm is founded 40 years ago, and Mr. Grimm, the founder of the company, was really a pioneer for optical methods. When he started to develop the first instruments, the measurement performance was honestly quite poor. But he was a pioneer. He started with a 4-channel device, with 8-channel device, with 16-channel device. And then he increased always the size channels to 31 and even more today. I come to that later. And the Grimm company was the first company that got for an optical measurement the TÜV approval. And you may know even in India, TÜV German is a very challenging test, let us say. Yeah, so very precise definitions of lab tests, of field tests, what the instrument should deliver on quality, on data. So if you have a TÜV approved system, you can say, okay, my instrument is really capable to measure ambient air pollutants. Applications, we want to measure PM10, PM2.5. We want to measure ultrafine particles. We want to have the number concentration and the size. You see here again the picture, size, time, and number. So we want to get information about the size of the aerosols because the size gives us very important information about the source. What are the requirements? We want to have continual data and in real time. So it doesn't make sense if we know after tomorrow what was the concentration today. So we want the data in real time. We want high time resolved data. When you imagine a construction or a street, sometimes the events are only a second. So a big truck is moving around the street with a huge diesel engine. The emission of aerosols is only a second. So you want to capture these very small events. So you need high time resolution. And then I can tell you, you need also a large measuring range. One of our facilities is in South Bavaria, close to Salzburg. And the lowest concentration I personally measured there was in the range of a microgram per cubic meter. So very low, close to zero. The highest concentration I measured personally was in Hanoi, Vietnam. I measured 1,400 microgram per cubic meter. That's a huge concentration. Why? There was at that time a lot of two-strokes engine crossing the street and very big background as well. So our cutting-edge aerosol measurement technology should be capable to measure very low concentration, but on the other side also very high concentration. By the way, this cutting-edge aerosol spectrometer that I will explain you in that presentation can measure down to 0.1 microgram per cubic meter, and then can measure up to a level of milligrams. So we have not any problem to measure in Southeast Bavaria or in Beijing or in Delhi or in Mumbai. That instrument captures the full range of aerosols available in the atmosphere. Of course, compact and mobile system is a big issue. It should be user-friendly and low maintenance. This is the aerosol spectrometer I will explain you in my presentation. This is a device to measure ultrafine particles, and one easy equation is as smaller the particles, as more complex and also more expensive the instrument will be. Yeah? So we are here talking about instruments in the range between, let us say, 15,000 and 25,000 euro. When we are measuring ultrafine particles, we go very quickly in the range of 40, 50, even thousand, even higher prices. So as smaller the particles, as more complex the instrument, and most often as more expensive. What does it mean cutting-edge aerosol technologies? So cutting-edge aerosol technologies are based on light. We are measuring light. I was general manager of a LiDAR company. So we were developing LiDAR, light range and emission systems. And I can tell you, you can measure a single photon from the troposphere with a big periscope. So you can measure like very sensible. You can really measure single photons. And what is a big advantage when we are measuring aerosols with light? We do not contact them. We do not change them. We have not any effect on the aerosol. And that is especially for aerosols very important, that you do not touch it, that you do not change the size, that you avoid agglomeration, diffusion losses, impaction losses, sedimentation losses. So light is very fast and senseless. You have, of course, different possibilities when you have light on an aerosol. What we are measuring is we are measuring the scattered light, the reflection, the elastic scattering, where you see the wavelength is not changed. So the incident light and the reflected light has the same wavelengths. And as larger the particle, as stronger is the scattered light. That is the base of a cutting-edge aerosol technology. When I talk about cutting-edge aerosol measurement technologies, I want to show you that we have, for all aerosols in the atmosphere, different types of measurement devices. The smallest aerosols are formatted from SO2OH radicals, ammonia, gases, precursors. They build very small cluster in the range of 1 nanometer. Here we have the so-called SMPS. Then we have nucleation aerosols in the range between 10 and 100 nanometer. We can measure it with an SMPS plus CEN-CPC. And these two devices I will show you later. And then we have coarse aerosols. Here in that range, we can measure that with the optical aerosol spectrometer. And I will show you the latest development of my company, the EDM280 Environmental Dust Monitor 280 in that presentation. Very important is you should never mix indoor instruments. This portable device, 11D, here's a sampling pipe, with outdoor measurement devices. An outdoor measurement device you can also use indoor, no problem. But when you go with an indoor instrument outside, you have strong influences of humidity. Most often you have a water surface on the surface of the aerosol. I explained that we do not want to measure water, so you should never use an indoor instrument for outdoor. For outdoor instruments, we have instruments where we are drying the sample before we are measuring it. When we are talking about aerosol spectrometers, we have different principles. There's an ISO guideline where you can look for more details. We have the optical focusing where we hit with a laser, with a light into the aerosol flow. And then you have a certain part of the aerosol flow that you analyze. The advantage is you can adapt the volume depending on the aerosol concentration. The disadvantage is when you have only a small part of the full flow, you may have boundary effects where you do not really catch all particles in the correct size. The other possibility, and that is used by Grimm, by my company, we have an aerodynamic focusing. We accelerate the aerosols with an orifice, and then we have a laser passing through that accelerated aerosols, and then we measure all aerosols coming through that laser beam. We are calling that full flow analysis, and the big advantage is you measure each single particle, and therefore you can distinguish 0.1 microgram per cubic meter from 0. So the detection limit is outstanding. The disadvantage could be that you cannot adapt it to higher concentration. You should need a diluter, but our instruments are capable, as I mentioned, to measure very low concentrations up to milligrams per cubic meter. So in the atmosphere, you have not any problems. You have not to dilute. You can measure with the aerosol spectrometer all sizes and concentration. Now I come to the latest development of my company. It's the EDM280. EDM means Environmental Dust Monitor. It's the latest development, and you see here we measure PM10, PM4, PM2.5, PM1, TSP, total suspended, in 32 size channels. And we start from 178 nanometer to 29.4 micrometer. So we cover a broad range of aerosols. Of course, the main interest of the EDM280 is measuring PM10 and PM2.5. Why? Because they are limit values. The precursors, the 180, we have sold roughly 3,000 instruments worldwide. They are running all over the world. The EDM280 is the latest development. And what is very important when you're measuring aerosols, you have to suck them in very precisely. Then you dry the aerosols, most often by heating. So the EM280 uses a heating concept to dry the aerosols, to evaporate the water, and then the aerosols are directly straight ahead here in the optical cell of the instrument. Of course, all ambient measurement technologies are equipped with a meteo sensor, wind speed, wind field, meteo data as temperature, pressure, to combine it with the aerosol measurements. Here are some examples. That is a street canyon in Berlin. I don't know if you have ever visited Berlin. We have many stations measuring PM10 and PM2.5 in Berlin city. This is a Frankfurter Allee, highly frequented street. And you see here our sampling pipes. Why using such a 2 sigma head? Yeah, this 2 sigma head has the capability that even if there's a high wind speed, the constant wind speed is reduced to a minimum here because of the geometry, and then we suck the aerosols representatively into the instrument with only 1.2 liter a minute. And now all aerosol measurement devices are only as good as the analytical engine, let us say. What is the analytical engine of an aerosol spectrometer is, of course, the optical cell. So the optical cell, let us say, is the motor, is the engine of every device. And in that cell, we spent more than 30 years of development. It looks easy, but it is not easy, I can tell you. You have a laser diode, and then you are using mirrors to generate a laser curtain of only 40 micrometer. Through that laser curtain, aerosols were sucked in and crossed, and here you see an orifice. So the aerosols were accelerated to 50 kilometers an hour. 17 meters a second, 15 kilometers an hour, the aerosols were accelerated, and then you can measure each single particle after each other. Then the scattered light is here bundled by a gold coated mirror to pin diode. So this optical cell measures in real time, in 1 second, all aerosols. It's a full flow analyze coming through that laser curtain. What you also see here is the so-called rinsing air. This rinsing air avoids contamination of the optics with dust. You can imagine when you are measuring aerosols, main issue could be that the optical cell can be contaminated, can be diluted, so you have often to clean it, and therefore we are using a rinsing air for continuous cleaning of the optics. Ultrafine particles. Ultrafine particles are so small that you cannot measure them directly. You have to use a physical behavior of particles, and that you can see on a clear sky when you have an air jet flying and there's a huge water concentration in the atmosphere. You see the condensation stripes. Yeah? And that is the same effect we are using to measure UFP, ultrafine particles. We call it a condensation particle counter. So we condensate around the particles a vapor, and then the particle grow, and then we can measure the particle optically. So the aerosol with the small particles goes through that wick, and that wick is heated to 36 degrees. We have butanol. So butanol is a very nice reagent to condensate on aerosols. Then the aerosols with the saturated butanol vapor goes into the condenser. Here it is cooled from 36 to 10 degrees. And then the particle, the aerosol, is like a coin growing around the condensated butanol. And from the very small particles, you have huge droplets, and then you can count with the laser beam, as I explained you, with the same optics. We call it a condensation particle counter. There's meanwhile a European standard, a CEN, that is well defining what is really the counting efficiency behavior. There are also devices on the market that are working with water. The advantage when we are using butanol and alcohol is that all aerosols, independent on the chemical composition, are growing and captured here with a laser beam. This gives us the information about the number, but of course we are losing the information about the size when we are, let them, growing by condensation process. Therefore, we have the so-called scanning mobility particle sizer. What does that mean? We have very small aerosols. Because we are interested here in only the small, we have an impactor to extract the larger aerosols. Then we neutralize the aerosols. Neutralize means we bring the aerosols in a very well-defined equilibrium charging state by using ions that we are generating. And when the aerosol is carrying a couple of ions on the surface, it has an electrical field behavior. So the aerosol goes here in, then we have here the so-called DMA. And by changing the high voltage in that DMA, we are changing the flight way of the aerosols, and only, as here green marked, only a certain size of aerosols comes out as a sample flow. Then we have only one size, and then these aerosols are measured with a CPC or Faraday cup electrometer. And by stepping, by changing the voltage, we have different sizes that only extracted from the instrument, and then we can decrypt them. It looks a little bit tricky, but I can tell you all measurement devices for sizing aerosols are meanwhile based on that principle. The cutting edge issue is, of course, to make it as robust and maintenance free as possible, to use it for 24/7 measurement. This is a device that we are offering to the market. This is very brand new. It's an SMPS with CPC. You see all is 19-inch, and you can install it in a small container. And you see it captures the size from 10 nanometer to roughly 1 micrometer. So a broad range of very, very small particles. The time resolution is 4 minutes. Why the time resolution is a couple of minutes? Because we are scanning, we are changing the voltage step by step. Now I come, of course, for a very important issue. I always say grace or theory, what really counts is on the field. So what is really the measurement performance? And when I want to talk about cutting edge aerosol technologies, the measurement performance should be outstanding. Otherwise, it's not cutting edge. And we have in Germany the trend that the PM10 concentration is strongly decreasing. Yeah, you see here 1995. I was working on my PhD, by the way, on that time about tropospheric ozone. And then the concentration was very strong decreasing. There's only a couple of micrograms per cubic meter. And the difference between urban background and street is not as high. So we need an instrument that is really capable to measure that low concentration. That is done by optical methods. So the decreasing trend of aerosols is very good for all optical measurement methods, not only for our, because an optical measurement device can measure very, very small concentrations. Here I show you some measurement examples from the German TÜV approval test in Cologne, urban background, street, industrial, and in Italy. And you see the intercomparison of two EDM280 is brilliant. It looks like one device. And when you compare, that is most often done, you compare automatic measuring systems with gravimetric references, where you have filters inside and where you are weighing the 24-hour values. And then you see a very, very good correlation between the gravimetric reference and the optical aerosol spectrometer. I see the big advantage of this gravimetric instruments that you can analyze the filter for different chemical composition. For example, vanadium is a good tracer for oil, arsenic is a good tracer for coal, antimony is a very good tracer for brake from cars. So you can analyze the filters, that is fine, but these reference units give you only daily values. So you have no information about short-time events, for example, caused by this car. When we are talking about ultrafine particles, we have very, very different concentrations. We have very clean stratosphere where we have only 0.1 particle per cubic meter. And that is interesting when we are talking about mass of aerosols, we are talking about a cubic meter. When we are talking about ultrafine particles, we are talking about a cubic centimeter. And I'm quite sure that when you are just breathing air in your room, you will breathe a couple of thousand particles per cubic centimeter. So typical average background is in a couple of thousand. When you have a city as Delhi with a lot of traffic, with a lot of industry, you can easily reach a couple of 10,000 up to 140,000 in this example. And when you measure directly at the urban highway, you can have up to 2 million particles in such a small volume. And as I mentioned, these very small particles go directly deep into the lungs, into the blood. So the harmful effect of ultrafine particles is extremely high. And therefore, the World Health Organization recommended to measure ultrafine particles. I show you, I don't know if you have visited our very famous Berlin Zoo. It's one of the most famous in the world. And directly in front of the zoo, you see a typical measurement container with our device here on the roof. And that device is measuring ultrafine particles with a high time resolution. And when you see on a Monday, because here are buses and diesel cars and taxis, you have a huge increase of concentration counts in the morning in the rush hour. Interesting is when you look for a Sunday, you see during the night or in the evening, we have a very low concentration. And then in the evening here, concentration increases because here are many pubs and discos and many young people are using their car or the bus or the taxi to go there to the center of Berlin. And then you see on a Sunday, on the day, the concentration is not high, but then in the evening, when the private activities increase, you see high concentration of ultrafine particles up to 100,000 particles per cubic centimeter. Cutting edge means the instrument should be flexible. You should easily install the instrument on the roof, as here, for example, on a typical shelter, but it should be also very flexible that you have a small air-conditioned container where you can also install the instrument. That is here, for example, in the urban background of Berlin, very green area. You see here the typical measurement container of the Berlin network and our instrument. That was a measurement campaign we carried out with the Berlin CNET to measure ultrafine particles. So all is installed in that small container. You just need electricity. And I show you some results of ultrafine particles. When we are talking about ultrafine particles, the very small particles, we have huge difference between background, that is a logarithmic scale, and that is a time, and the data series I condensed to 5 seconds. The instrument can measure even in 1 second. You see a logarithmic scale, so the background concentration is in a couple of thousands, and the highest concentration to the street, the deep blue, we have here concentrations over 1 million particles per cubic centimeter, so a huge concentration. So when we are measuring ultrafine particles, we need a high time resolution to see really the events. And I will want to close my presentation with some interesting measuring results. You may know when it's raining, after the rain, the weather is most often quite clear. The air is more gentle to breathe, so it's more convenient. Because when you see here, you have PM10 and PM2.5, and then the blue is the rain, the concentration decreases. We call it a washout. A washout based on the diffusion processes and the impaction process. So the droplets are catching out the aerosols. For the very small particles, the UFP, that is here the red time series, you see not such a behavior. Yeah, here's the same day. We have the rain, the blue, it starts to rain, but the concentration stays relatively stable. So the ultrafine particles are not cleaned out, are not washed out after rainfall, and the concentration stays quite stable in the atmosphere. That was my last slide. I'm perfect in time. I thank you so much for your attention, and we have now a lot of time, hopefully, for questions and comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Markus. So now forum is open for question answer. So I invite all participants to ask your question one by one. Yeah, please turn on your mic and ask question.
Good afternoon, sir. So my question is about the ultrafine particle counter. You said that you use butanol to condense onto the ultrafine particle so that the diameter increases, right? So my question is, are there any sort of particles that butanol will not work on? And what exactly are the properties of the particles that make butanol a good condensation fluid onto it?
Yeah, thank you very much for the interesting question. So ultrafine particle measurements, we are interested in most often the number. And therefore, the European community defined so-called CEN, Central European Normalized Reference Units. And these units are all based on butanol. So butanol is a liquid that is meanwhile written in the legislation, in the European legislation, to use it. I know there are many good working water CPCs, and of course water is more comfortable for atmospheric research, but water has a property that not all particles are very good condensed. Butanol, we can condense soot particles, and soot particles are hydrophobic. So to condensate soot, carbon, elemental carbon and organic carbon with water is difficult. With butanol, we have not any problem. So butanol, and I can tell you the CEN legislation requires a so-called counting efficiency of 10 nanometer, 50%. So the CPC should measure 10 nanometer particles exactly with a 50% efficiency. And that is only used or only done with butanol. So our CPCs that we are using for atmospheric research are all in agreement, in accordance to that Central European legislation. I don't know how is the situation in India, if you have also such a norm, a standard to standardize counting capacities of CPCs. But maybe you can give the answer by yourself.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Other questions or comments?
Sam, can you increase your volume? Yeah. Yes, bit better.
Yes. Yeah, that is. I honestly, I asked the same by myself. It's a VDI, a German VDI proven head. It's not only used by Grimm, it's also used by other manufacturers as Pallas. And I cannot really tell you what is really the 2 sigma. You may know that a Gaussian function is described by sigma, yeah, by the standard deviation. But the big argument to use that 2 sigma head is that if you have high wind speeds, higher, for example, 10 meters a second, the wind speed is really decreased to 0, and then you can suck it with 1.2 liter a minute. So the volume flow we are using is very small. And on the EDM 180, we had not such a 2 sigma head. And it happens that on mountain stations or high altitudes and high wind speeds, the big particles, because of the big inertia, was not sucked in. With the 2 sigma head, we have not any problem anymore. So we tested the instrument even in very windy conditions in Austria, and even the large particles, and large means 6-8 micrometer, we can really suck in. But a good question, I have to look in the VDI paper what is really 2 sigma, why it's called 2 sigma. We all call it 2 sigma. I think because of the sucking in procedure. Yeah. Yeah, drying is a very, very big issue when we are talking about atmospheric aerosols. The EDM-180 was equipped with a Nafion membrane, where we reduced outside the Nafion membrane the pressure, and by reducing the pressure, there was a diffusion of the water to the Nafion membrane to the outside. But this Nafion membrane required service. And the service was relatively high. For the EDM-280 and for our CPC, we decided to heat the sampling air, but heating is always dangerous because it can happen that you evaporate the particles. And therefore, for example, the EDM-280 measures all the time the humidity of the aerosols in the optical cell, and it only heats when the humidity is over 40%. The growing of particles caused by humidity is defined by the Kelvin process. And particles really start to grow when the humidity is higher than 55%. It's an exponential function. So when we dry all the time the aerosols, that the aerosol humidity is not over 40%, we are safe. And if you would imagine a sunny day in Delhi, sunny dry day, the instrument would not heat at all to avoid evaporation of not stable aerosols. So you have aerosols in the atmosphere, ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate, they are not thermically stable. So you should not heat too high because then you evaporate them, but you want to measure them. Therefore, thank you for your question. Heating is a big issue, and cutting edge means also that the heating or the drying of the aerosols is very, very intelligent, let us say. Of the CPC, we have different CPCs. We have 0.3, 0.6, and 1 liter a minute. And for the EDM-280 or for all aerosol spectrometers of GRIM, we are using the same flow rate of 1.2 liter a minute. The big issue or the big argument for the full flow analysis is that we analyze each single particle that we suck in. And when you can imagine a Saharan dust event where you have only a small but huge particles, you should cover or catch them all. And therefore, a full flow analyze where you analyze all particles sucked in the instrument is a big advantage here. For the CPC, we have different possibilities, as I mentioned. It only depends on the concentration. Yeah, which flow is the best. I know that TSI, the worldwide leader for CPC, is using 1 liter per minute CPC. Therefore, we have also developed a 1 liter CPC. Sorry? Yeah, also a good question. So we have a so-called universal DMA where you have a small, a medium, and a large DMA. The large DMA we most often use for ambient air measurement. It starts from 10 nanometer and ends at 1 micrometer. So that is perfect for ambient air monitoring. It's a large. It's roughly the 30 centimeters, the active length. Then we have a small DMA that starts really at 3-4 micrometer. When you want to measure 1 nanometer particles, you have to enhance the size, therefore. And for that, we have developed together with Air Motors the so-called SMPS, where we are using an Air Motors magnifier to enhance the 1 nanometer. So the SDMA starts at 4 nanometers, ends at 80 nanometer, and then you have the medium DMA from 5 nanometer to 350, and then you have the large from 10 to 1000. For ambient air monitoring, I would always recommend to use the large one from 10 nanometer to 1 micrometer, and there's also a CEN legislation from the Tropos. You may heard about the Tropos. The Tropospheric Institute of Leipzig, very famous. There's my friend Ali Wiedensola active, and he is also carrying out actors in the Global Calibration Center. And there is also decided that the D50 for an SMPS should also be 10 nanometer. You're welcome. It's a pity that I cannot see you, but I hope you see me, yeah? Okay, perfect. Very good. Very good. Yeah, my colleagues are today. I can tell you, my colleagues are today at Tropos in Bali, because there's a very good connection between Grimm and Tropos. Tropos is only 30 minutes away from our facilities, and there's a very good cooperation. And of course, we are very interested that we are on the actress whitelist and that we fulfill all requirements given by legislation and given from the Tropos. Yeah. So I'm happy that you were here for training. So, gentlemen, you are all very welcome to visit my facilities. We are close to Berlin or to Leipzig. If you want to learn more about aerosol calibration and validation and how we do really develop and build our instruments, you are warmly invited. I will take a day time for you, and then I can show you around, because what I not mentioned today, calibration of the instruments is one of the most important issue. And if you compare instruments, they should measure the same, like one act to the other. In the EDM 280, I just show you an intercomparison. So we do a lot of work just generating aerosols and calibrating the instruments. So you are very warm invited. If you are in Berlin or if you are in Germany, you should visit us. And I think it's a very valuable visit for you and for us as well.
Any other question for Markus? Okay, so I believe we are on time, and we have finished. And I take this opportunity to thanks Dr. Markus for his excellent talk, and he spent very quality time, though he was very busy these days, but he promised to interact with us, and he has delivered a very nice talk. I trust on behalf of IST and my student and my the colleagues from IST, I really want to express our sincere thanks for your valuable time and wonderful talk. So thank you, Dr. Markus. And as a token of appreciation, this is our IST mug, which is a magic mug, and I'll be sending to you through Veer Kumar sir to your office.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ram. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. So this is the one, and with this, thank you very much. And Sam, I think you will turn on. Stop the streaming, right? Okay.